Hello, my name is Pedro Jimenez for the Deutsche Amerikanische Zentrum in Stuttgart, and I would like to thank you, those of you joining us, and for you joining us here today, as we honor the legacy and memory of Henrietta Lacks. Being here today and reflecting on the word legacy, I couldn't think of a better way to honor and give voice to Henrietta Lacks' legacy in the form of HeLa 100 and the Henrietta Lacks Initiative. And we are here joined today by Victoria Baptiste, great-granddaughter, and Alfred Lacks Carter Jr., grandson, respectively. And first and foremost, thank you once again for being here. And who better to introduce themselves than you? So first, I would just like to ask, what is your background, story, followed by how did the Henrietta Lacks experience affect your lives?
My name is Alfred Lacks Carter Jr., as you stated earlier. I am the founder and CEO of the Henrietta Lacks House, which is a transitional housing program back in Baltimore, Maryland, United States. It's a transitional housing program for men returning home from incarceration. This was a deep-seated initiative that I had in my heart to give back to Henrietta's legacy.
Okay.
And I am Victoria Baptiste, great-granddaughter of Henrietta Lacks. I am also the granddaughter of Lawrence Lacks, her eldest living son. I am a nurse. I'm a registered nurse where I'm from, specifically in nephrology. I'm sorry.
Address him. I mean.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking straight at the thing. Okay.
It's conversational.
Okay. I'm Victoria Baptiste, Henrietta Lacks' great-granddaughter. I'm also the granddaughter of Lawrence Lacks, whom is Henrietta's eldest living son. I'm a nephrology nurse as a profession. And my great-grandparents, both Henrietta and her husband David, are most of the reason why I became a nurse to advocate for patients.
Oh, wow, so giving back has been a part of your lives.
Absolutely.
And professions as adults. Okay.
Yes.
Good. So there's, I guess, no easy way to segue into this, but all of us being from the United States, my country, our country, the United States, has had a very complicated and painful history when it comes to people of color and social injustices, and especially reflecting on them and how they impacted the world we live in today. Such things as systematic racism, healthcare access in the United States. It's a big question. How has that affected you in your line of work, and what do you do to address these issues?
As a nurse, you see different levels of racism. The reason why I say that is because people have different definitions of what racism is to them.
Right.
In healthcare, most times you see a lot of social determinants to care, and that racism is one of them. Meaning that racism could be just because of the color of your skin.
Right.
Somebody already saying, I don't want to treat you a certain way, or you don't deserve as much access to certain things because of that. Racism can also be one thinking that one person is more deserving of something than another group of people. And that is something that I combat with more often in healthcare nowadays. So people come in, like say for instance, a patient could come and say that they're in pain.
Right.
Person of color. The first thing that a lot of people think is seeking, like they're drug seeking. So that's why racism can be an automatic barrier, because that person might really be in severe pain.
Right.
But because your racism, that barrier has already made you feel like, oh, they're not really in pain. They're just coming in here to get, something else. So those are barriers, because that's somebody thinking that, you're not deserving of something else. So we see racism in different layers, but in medicine it has no place, because this is supposed to be a safe place for everyone, health equity for everyone, no matter, we take an oath, it doesn't matter gender, creed. We're supposed to treat everyone equally. We're supposed to have no malfeasance. That means we're supposed to do the best we can for everyone, regardless of their background, whether that be socioeconomically or racially. So that is something we continuously are combating. So I make sure I educate patients to what their rights are in healthcare, what their options are as seeking other care if you don't feel like you're getting the best care possible where you are.
Right.
So that is one of the things that forges along for me to try to combat that racism, is letting them know that if you don't feel like you can trust the care that you're receiving here,
Right.
that you don't have to feel like this is your only option. Like with my great-grandmother,
Right.
she did not have that many other options. She didn't have anybody advocating or educating her
Right.
as to what her options were, and that was in big part because of her race. People of color didn't have a lot of access to health care back then, so she had to go who would serve her, and then she had to take whatever care that she could give and hope and trust that she would get the best care. But that's not what we found.
No, thank you for that answer. And for yourself?
For myself, in my profession of helping men return home from incarceration, we know that there's a lot of racism, like you said, systemic racism in the justice system. And a lot of men, for one reason or another, they don't have people to return home to, especially guys who are sentenced to long sentences. They might have death in the family, a family member that they used to live with, they might not be there. So we need to have more things in place for these guys when they return home. So I was, blessed to have family support.
Right.
And I wanted to convey that to guys that are in prison. I want to be that support system. So when their sentence is up, they'll have a nice, clean place to come to, safe, and also to help them with education and job training and things like that, to sustain them to be productive members of society when they return. And when you talk about racism in healthcare, there's barriers for care.
Right.
You have institutions that are on purpose built in affluent neighborhoods, so people of color and poor people can't access them because of, socioeconomics. They might not have the funds to get there. Public transportation isn't accessible.
Right.
So these are the things that we need to combat in the racism when it comes to healthcare.
Thank you so much for both of those answers, and I think that will help those, especially the German audience watching, because to them that's such a foreign concept, even when it comes to basic things like public transportation, for them to understand how we see things and how we experience things. So no easy way to transition to the next question, but in preparation for today and in general, historically I talked about sort of these social injustices, and I thought about, for example, the Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis on black men, black women, people of color, conducted between 1932 and 1972 by the United States Public Health Service and Centers for Disease and Control and Prevention. So logically and historically, people of color have had a mistrust, if you will, in government, science, etc. In your respective fields, such as nursing, healthcare, and transitioning back from post-incarceration, how do you help? I know that's a difficult question, but how do you try and help people sort of find that light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak?
Well, for myself, to help people find the light at the end of the tunnel, I lead by example.
Right.
As you stated, myself, post-incarceration. I give guys that are in the situation that I used to be in,
Right.
Hope. To be able to come out and to do something positive and to create a narrative for my family in a positive way, that gives guys determination that if Alfred Carter if he done it,
Yeah.
coming from where he came from, then I can do it. So I just try to live by example. I try to do things the right way, and it just translates into success. So that's what I do.
For me as a nurse in my day-to-day work, I try to be the advocate that my great-grandmother didn't have. So I try to be that person for my patients. I know a lot of times, like you said, those barriers with Tuskegee and things, that's a generational barrier, because each generation is taught by the elder ones
Right.
about those things. You hear about those
Right.
horror stories. So even though this generation has access to a lot more things,
Right.
some of that underlying fear of those type of Tuskegee experiments, the polio experience, all of those things are still very much barriers in those communities to seek health care and how much trust they can give
Right.
to those health care providers. So I try to be, an advocate for patients, to let them know that there are allies out there. People are here in healthcare. We do care for you. We do want you to come seek care, but we know that we have to keep a very transparent relationship with patients. Once you get that trust with the patient, you have to keep it. So we can't start,
Right.
trying to push things under, no, don't worry. We have to make sure we keep that conversation going. But I also, like I said, I advocate hard for my patients because no one advocated for my great-grandmother. I try to educate my patients because no one took the time to educate my grandmother about not only what exactly her diagnosis meant for her, but what the treatment that was involved was going to take away from her. So because a lot of times, yes, you may get treatment for one thing because this is the detrimental thing to you, like cervical cancer,
Right.
which my great-grandmother died from. That's you die from that.
Right.
But sometimes the treatment, depending on what your quality of life goal is, my great-grandmother wanted to still have children.
Right.
She didn't know that having that radium to treat the cancer
Right.
would then make her infertile.
Right.
So it's important to make sure we give the patients all of the information, not just the parts we think they can digest. We have to give them all of the facts and let them make informed decisions so they can make informed consent, because you can't really informally consent to something that you didn't understand. So I try to be that difference every day.
And also, to add to it, the treatment that Henrietta Lacks received, it accelerated her,
Right.
her demise.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
So I'm pretty sure if, she was informed about this, she would have had, well, at least they could have gave her the option
Right. And that's
to say yes or no.
Like my cousin said, that option, that's a lot of the problem that the patients don't think that they have.
Right.
Is that option. Because sometimes we still have that mindset that whatever the doctors say, it's got to be right. Like, you don't want to question
Right.
it.
Just take your medicine.
Or you just, exactly.
Right.
Even if you feel like this medicine is making me feel a certain way, you just do it because that's what the doctor said. So that's why, I said transparency. Like Alfred said, giving them the option. I'm transparent to me. Like with COVID-19,
Right.
our family has been advocating to educate patients about that. We know that, Henrietta cells were used in making the COVID-19 vaccine. But I, as a nurse, I was vaccinated. Me and my daughter were both vaccinated for COVID-19 together. I posted on social media because I know that's how
Right.
we're getting the word out of, with everybody now. I was able to vaccinate, my cousins, and I was able to vaccinate my own mother.
Right.
So, and I tell that story to people because I want you to know that not only am I asking as a healthcare provider for you to be vaccinated, but I'm willing to do that.
Right. You're walking the walk, yeah.
I'm advocating that for
Right.
my family to also get that. My grandfather, again, the eldest living son of Henrietta, he got his COVID vaccine even before I did.
Right.
And that was inspiring. My mother
Right.
didn't want to get it at first because she
Right.
was afraid. Her dad got it.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that broke that barrier, and then for her daughter to be able to be the one to give her that vaccine, that's helping to break some of that distrust for many people and families of color.
Yeah, like two key points, I guess, would be like walking the walk leading by example. Some interesting things that I heard that you said that really hit home for me was your example, Alfred, about sort of leading by example. Coming from my experience, this is not about me, but like my father too, post-incarceration, and him having that sort of emotional support and someone there. Or you mentioned in healthcare, some people don't have that luxury, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
And also this aspect of the light at the end of the tunnel. We do have allies, sort of, this aspect that you're not in this alone. It might be more difficult for people of color in this system, but that doesn't mean that there's no hope and that there's no light at the end of the tunnel. So information is power, and I think that's a clear indicator of your stories and what you mentioned here today. So thank you for sharing that, as personal as it was.
Fortunate enough to obtain a legal team, Mr. Ben Crump and Mr. Peter Seeger, who are going to be very, very vocal, and they are going to get justice for Henrietta Lacks and her family, because, for so long, other people created the narrative for this family. So no longer will we let outside entities dictate what goes on in this family and what direction we go in this family. So the lawsuit is basically taking back what was rightfully ours, because the HeLa cells were obtained illegally.
Right.
And these companies who are making billions of dollars off of the HeLa cell, and they're not acknowledging the Lacks family.
Right.
And it's when you get down to your core of it, it's racism. And so, my family no longer is going to tolerate it, and we're moving forward in a positive direction, and we feel real good about the outcome. We are.
Okay.
And just for me to piggyback on what my cousin is saying, our family is working hard to get our voice back, to create our own narrative, because who knows us better than us?
Right.
So a lot of people create a narrative that kind of softens the blow of how much we've lost as a family, how serious it was for them to procure her cells without, permission, or even letting her family know that these things were going on. Let's talk about how 70 years ago, on October 4th, we lost Henrietta Lacks. But Johns Hopkins had a press release, that same day.
Right.
George Guy came out and said this wonderful things he created, right?
Right,
But he never
right.
acknowledged that those things came from Henrietta.
Right.
We've been in a situation that goes back to that racism my cousin was saying, like, this is just, it's from racism. Because they gave her those different monikers, like, Helen Lane and all these different things, because they didn't want people to know that that came from, a black woman. Because let's just be truth. In
Right,
1951, we have racism now, but racism was a totally harder animal back then.
Right.
We had less rights, even less access, so they didn't want to make it like, oh, this great thing I got came from this, these people, so to speak. So we've been combating that as a family by educating and advocating. That's why we have, the HeLa 100 Henrietta Lacks initiative. It's because we have a lot of family-led initiatives to fight those social injustices, fighting for that health equality and health equity that our, beloved Henrietta did not receive. So we're taking back our story, and that's why we keep asking everybody to say her name.
Right.
Henrietta Lacks.
Henrietta Lacks. And 100 years, right? She just celebrated her,
Yes,
her
her
100th
centennial
birthday.
year was actually last year, and that's what started out this initiative with the HeLa 100 Henrietta Lacks initiative. It was originally supposed to be a conference for 3 days, where the family wanted to get some awareness out, and we had a big ask. We asked you guys to join us. We asked
Right.
people all over the world to join us and, acknowledging her and all the great that she's done and saying her name.
Right.
And that's part of the way we got over here to Stuttgart. We asked and people answered. And
People are responding, yes.
People are responding, and our hope is to keep on building that relationship and having you guys keep on, responding to us, and helping us to push her legacy on and helping us also to, create partnerships for those things like eradicating cervical cancer, about creating, differences with social injustices and health equity.
Good, thank you. I guess in closing, one of the things that was important for me, I guess, to sort of highlight Henrietta Lacks, the human being, but her being so much more than just her cells.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, how would you like for her to be remembered?
I would love for my great-grandmother to be remembered as like a community advocate, so to speak.
Okay.
I'll say that because in that day we didn't have all those fancy terms, but she knew that there was needs, and she helped to create, way for people. So my grandmother, my great-grandmother, and great-grandfather came from Clover, Virginia, to Turner Station in Maryland to create a different life for their families, for jobs. There were other people, other men that wanted to do the same thing for their families. So as they
Right.
were migrating up, Henrietta, she would use what she had, the means that she had, and help and give it to other people. So that's community,
Right.
Right. So that's a big part of what our family has grown up as, advocating for our community, working within our community. I'm a nurse still in my community, but even before that, as a young child, our family had, stores and things in our community. So it's the way we always have been taught to give back to our community, to help others. And I want them to remember Henrietta as being that type of a person also, and that's part of the type of a legacy she left behind, is that community activism and that community support type of a detail.
I would like for Henrietta Lacks to be remembered as a loving, warm, nurturing human being. Because as Victoria said, when they migrated from the South in the United States, there were other families that wanted to do the same thing. So she was really like the blueprint. When they got to Maryland, a lot of the families would stay with Henrietta and my grandfather until they obtained jobs to move out on their own. So she's a community leader. And
We want to
also,
talk about allies.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
exactly.
And also, even in her absence, she instilled into her children, such as my mother, Deborah Lacks, the determination to want to know who Henrietta Lacks was. My mom was only 2 years old when Henrietta passed. So growing up as a young child and a young teenager and a young adult, she always had the determination and the drive to find out the things that made her mother tick.
Right.
So a lot of those things were instilled in my mom, which were instilled in me, passed down from generation to generation. And that's why, I'm the way that I am and want to give back and help other people, because it started with Henrietta Lacks.
Sorry, I got a little emotional there. His mother meant so much to not just him, but to everybody in our family. And she definitely instilled those same things in me as well.
But thank you for sharing that. And I think family, knowledge is power, awareness. I think for those watching us maybe at home who didn't know, now you know. And what to do with that now is, I guess, my next point, or my last question is, how can we engage ourselves in 2021 and maybe for Henrietta Lacks' 200th birthday and so on? How can we engage ourselves now?
Well, I have an 18-year-old, so the way of engagement has changed. Thank you. The way of engagement has changed a little bit in the times. My daughter likes to say that today she feels like sometimes she learns more off of TikTok
Right.
than she does at school. So saying that, a part of the way that the kids, students can engage with us right now is helping us to keep the movement going.
Right.
But tell us how they would like to celebrate Henrietta Lacks and her legacy through art. So please, if they would be so delighted to do so, send off their artwork that they would like to celebrate Henrietta to media@HeLa100.org. So they can be a part of our virtual museum. We now have a virtual museum where you can go on there, you can click the different art mediums, and you can get a little story behind the journey that we've been on since we've started. About 10 or so years ago, with
Yes.
being able to, going out openly, speaking to everybody about Henrietta and fighting for her legacy.
Right, and any of those links and descriptions we'll put in the description of the video, so just in case, just a reminder.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that's one way that they can help keep the HeLa 100 Henrietta Lacks initiative going by showing us how they like to celebrate her through art.
Absolutely, and also, people can continue the legacy of Henrietta Lacks by educating other people. First, educating yourself, and then educating other people, because she has impacted the world, profoundly. But there's always somebody that doesn't know who Henrietta Lacks is.
Right.
So teach one, and
Pass it on.
pass it on, and let everyone know the significance of the HeLa cell, and let them know who the HeLa cell derived from. They came from African American woman, 31 years old. She passed away at such a early age, before her life even began, and we want people to know that she was a human being, because pharmaceutical companies and these big conglomerates,
Right.
They have dehumanized Henrietta Lacks, and we're putting the human element back into the conversation. That's why we say we are controlling the narrative in 2021. Letting everyone know that Henrietta Lacks was a woman, a black woman, and she was loved, and she loved others.
Absolutely, and like you were saying earlier, victors usually tell this story. Well, they thought that they may have been the victors in 1951. We are the victors now, and we are telling our own story. And if you guys would like to keep on the ride with us, onto our journey, partnering with us, please go to HeLa100.org so that we can see how to get in touch with us and see if our initiatives align, so we can continue to be the victors and keep our story going.
Absolutely. We're going from victims to victors.
To victors.
Absolutely, cousin.
Taking her story back. So, in closing, if you didn't know, now you know. Do me a favor, do yourselves a favor, like and share the video, but more importantly, share the Henrietta Lacks story, her experience, and thank you for sharing your thoughts and your experience. So, for Pedro Jimenez, the Deutsche Amerikanische Zentrum, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having
Thank you
us.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.